With that, the gentlewoman from Missouri, Mrs. Wagner, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the Vice Chair and I thank the Chairman for organizing this inaugural hearing of the 119th Congress on community banks, local institutions that provide absolutely essential banking services for communities across my home state of Missouri and the nation. 90% of the banks in my district are community banks, and they are often the main source of funding for small businesses and farmers throughout Missouri's 2nd District. After the passage of Dodd-Frank, community banks were forced to contend with complex, overly prescriptive, and burdensome suite of regulations. I don't think there are any junk fees. I think there are junk regulations imposed, if you want my humble opinion, but that made basic financial services less accessible to small businesses and middle-income Americans. The bills we are examining today will give local banks much-needed relief from these one-size-fits-all regulations, allowing them to better serve and meet the needs of local businesses, which will lead to investment and economic growth in Missouri and across the country. Ms. Rainey, the Vice Chair, and others have touched on this. You noted that after Dodd-Frank passed, de novo charters, which allow for the formation of new banks, I don't know why we just don't say that, de novo, I mean, whatever, dropped from an average of 170 per year to just a handful. This sharp drop in new banking opportunities is depriving communities of access to banking and local credit, especially in rural areas. Ms. Rainey, what reforms can Congress and/or regulators make to reverse this trend and encourage more de novo formation, new banks, new community banks?
Thank you for the question. And yes, as the chairman noted earlier, we've only had 82 new banks formed since 2010, and that's just that's not enough. And so there's so much that can be done here. And I really draw your attention to the minimum capital requirements, especially as you look at smaller, more rural areas. We need a proportionate connection to how much capital is required to what is the business that we're going to do. And we look at it more, again, from a one-size-fits-all. So period of time, so a base minimum capital requirements, and then a period of time for them to grow that capital to, again, allow for that flexibility and take into account the unique needs within that community.
Thank you. I think there's that and minimum capital requirements and much more that needs to be addressed. In 2020, based on robust data collection and analysis and an extensive public comment period, the FDIC crafted a new rule governing brokered deposits that allowed financial institutions to access diverse funding sources and gave consumers more control over their financial decisions. Yet, late in the previous administration, Chairman Gruenberg attempted to rush through a rule returning brokered deposit governance to the pre-2020 status quo without conducting analyses to justify the change, and in fact, seeking to collect data from banks on the characteristics of their brokered deposits. Are you ready for this? After the proposed rule. After many of my colleagues and I joined Financial Institutions Subcommittee Chair Barr, Andy Barr, in urging the FDIC to reverse course, I was glad to see FDIC Acting Chairman Travis Hill withdraw this very poorly crafted rule on January the 21st. Ms. Marshall, can you discuss how community banks use brokered deposits to access funding which allows them to make more loans to small businesses and to families?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the question. Deposit competition is greater now for our community banks than ever before. They are being forced to look at all of the tools and resources that are available and have a broad playbook of funding sources to be able to meet those demands and needs for their customers and those loan opportunities. You need to be able for a community bank to use brokered deposits, rely on core funding, have access and utilization of wholesale activities such as Federal Home Loan Bank System or the Federal Reserve discount window, and all of those things in measure structure with appropriate parameters, make for a holistic and appropriate funding structure for community banks to operate under. And community banks have used broker deposits successfully for a long time. They need to be able to continue to do so.
Yeah, my time is expiring here, but Mr. Kennedy, I do have 2 questions for you, and I'm going to submit them for the record, and I yield back to the chair.
Great. And that's